Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Spiritist Conversations, a show where we sit down with friends to talk about the world through a Spiritist lens in an informal, unscripted, and unplugged way. I'm Dan Assisi, and our Christmas conversation today is about, well, you guessed it, Christ. So pull up a chair and join us. We are broadcasting this episode to YouTube and Facebook. And if you want to interact with us live, please head over to the Spiritist Conversations page, or we may not be able to see your comments. So that's all the quick announcements that we have. And we can dive straight into the conversation, which is what we really care about at the end of the day. And I'm very glad to be joined here by my good friend, Flavio Zanetti. Hey, Flavio, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic, Dan. How are you?
Good, good. I hear that you're having some computer problems today. Tell me about that.
Yeah. My computer decided to run some upgrades right 5 minutes before we scheduled this get together. So go figure. I'm connecting live from my cell phone today instead.
Merry Christmas.
That's my Christmas gift for today.
And Flavio, I'm really excited today because our episode, this is a special one, right? We are calling it Follow Christ and Not Christians. And we have a friend that we want to bring on as well.
Absolutely. A very dear friend that joins us from Nashville, Tennessee.
Hi,
Welcome,
everyone.
Marcia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm really excited to be in this conversation with both of you.
And everyone, this is Marcia Trajano. She has been a great friend to ours. It's always great to see her in different places. And today we get to have her presence here with us as we tackle this very interesting topic. And our topic is Christmas and Christ in general. So we can stop and let that sit right there and see, how do we want to start this stuff today, people?
I think we should start by talking about Christmas.
Christmas.
That's the season to be jolly, I guess. Are we jolly? I mean, that's the first question. Are we in the mood? I mean, you can see us. For folks that are just listening to us, Dan and I both are wearing, red shirts or red, sweatshirts, and Marcia has this beautiful Christmas hat on. So we all found a way to dress in red today, some way, shape, or form.
Great description, Flavio, especially because, maybe red is our color from now on. Maybe we should do this more often.
What, planned or unplanned or unscripted a way to dress for the show? I don't think so.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
No.
but I think it answers your initial question. We definitely are feeling the season, right? It seems to be the season. 'Tis the season. But the season for what, people? What is Christmas all about? I think that maybe that's a great conversation starter for us there, because we all have this image of what Christmas is or should be. And while that is, for me, one of the most wonderful parts of the year, some folks might have different expectations. So what's Christmas for you guys? What are you most excited about Christmas?
Food. Always. There's always the food component. We all know that. All the get-togethers, the time spent with family, friends, all those things. Those are all important things that we do, right, during Christmas time. That's not the only thing that we do, correct, Marcia?
Yes, for me, it's about the time that we take to do things like decorating your place, to put lights, and there's a lot of, in my opinion, meaning that goes into a simple turn on a light that you wouldn't otherwise, right? But in the simple step, the simple pausing everything to make your home inward, we get to create that sense in my heart. This is at least how I see it. That is very warm and it's very welcoming, and at the center is that emotion that binds the family together. That's how I see Christmas. No matter where you're from, right? Jamaica, Brazil, Bora Bora, it doesn't matter. It still have that sense of warmth and family traditions.
Hey, Dan, I think you're on mute.
I am definitely on mute. I have this new microphone and I tap on top of it to unmute, and I keep forgetting that. And then And I have to count on my friend Flavio to save me here every time. Thank
Always.
you, Flavio. But I was going to say this is a great moment for us to also take a step back and acknowledge that we might have folks that are listening to us who may not be Christian, and that's very okay. We welcome everybody, and as a matter of fact, we want to wish you happy holidays too. We know there are many different traditions around the world who are celebrating a special date towards the end of the year. So thank you for being here. And I think that's sort of like a good way to start too, because I think that the elephant in the room for this conversation today is the idea of Christianity, at least for me, right? Which is, I think that in many different ways, we have inherited a idea of what to be Christian looks like. And that may or may not be aligned with what the Christ actually did or preached. And so I think that's a great place for us to start, because sometimes it's almost like that game of telephone, like when you're a child and somebody whispers a message in your ear and you're supposed to pass it on to the next person and the next person and the next person. And at the end of the day, when the message comes back to you, it may not be the original message. And so sometimes that's how I feel, right? I look out there and I see Christians or so-called Christians not behaving Christ-like.
But why would that be the case?
Good question. I wonder if our ego gets in the way. Flavio, what do you think?
I think I'm going to quote Kardec because, he knows better than we do, I'm sure. In the introduction of the Gospel according to Spiritism, there's something that's very poignant, at least to me when I first read it many, many years ago. I'm not going to divulge my age here. Sorry. Nice try.
Before Christmas was invented.
Before, of course, well, sort of. And Kardec talks about that the gospel was, Jesus' gospel was, divided in 5 parts. You guys remember that? The first part was the ordinary events of the life of Christ, life of Jesus, the miracles, the prophecies, and the word that served to establish some of the dogmas for different churches and whatnot. And the last was the moral teachings. It really had to do with moral teachings. The first 4 have been the object of a lot of controversy amongst different Christian traditions. Only the last one has really remained unassailable. So I think that explains why we see a lot of different, non-Christ-like behaviors, because folks interpret in their own way based on their own biases and a way of seeing life, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it, Flavio. And I think that it's just only normal too, right? Because I think that there was a fundamental shift that happened when Christ was crucified, right? And I think that's a very important, of course, milestone for all Christians, regardless of denomination. But I also mean that from a communications perspective, because until then, it was really about the religion of Christ, what Christ was doing or how he did it, right?
Yep.
Himself. After that, it became of like, how do we carry the mantle on? And it became the religion about Christ. It became about how do we understand what he has done and why? And I think that's when things obviously start to shift. And I think that he was wise enough to also not leave anything written down so that we could struggle with that and figure things out, right, by ourselves. So I think that those different interpretations come into play. And then we come into, social groups together and we make our own rules. And here are the 3 of us, and we think this is what Christianity looks like. And we start telling our kids about that. And then maybe another group does the same thing over there, right?
It joins.
And we start to have a different perspectives about what it is to be Christian-like. So I wonder if through the times we have forgotten to go back to the origin, right, and reevaluate what Christ actually did. And we are just trusting more like our parents and our elders than going back to the source, if that makes sense.
It's a very good point, Daniel, right? Because for me, religiosity and hence the theme of today's discussion, right? Follow Christ, not Christian. We have our religions, and from Christianity perspective, it has metamorphosized. It has changed into many different Christian religions, and we owe to the expression of faith to follow the elders, if you will. And I think it's important because on one hand, it demonstrates our love for God, right, through our religion, but we're missing the point. The religion is there to help us, remind us what is that is Christ. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about what is it that we may be missing. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah.
I can take a stab at it. I think Marcia, what we're missing is rationalizing Christ's teachings as they are applicable to our lives. Because for the most part, we followed traditions where that was taught, to us. That was, some of those were indoctrinated, down our throats. We never really questioned what we were being given as far as teachings and knowledge and whatnot. And the one thing that I admire about Spiritism is it invites us to make those critical, thinking decisions, right, for ourselves. Does this make sense? What was Jesus trying to do when he said X, Y, and Z? And oftentimes we just, oh yeah, so-and-so, or some pastor here, or some priest there, or some religious person over there told me to do X, therefore I'm doing it, without even questioning if it makes sense or not. Yeah. I think bringing that to our cognitive abilities is what's been missing for many, many years.
Great point, Flavio. And I can kind of, hop on your bandwagon here and kind of go on that one as well, because I think you're right. I think that to be more direct, right, is maybe we can say that we see a lot of priests and a lot of pastors and denominations and churches out there who perhaps take a stance that is not what I would interpret to be aligned with the message of Christ. And that is, they take a stance where they are actually separating people. And they're actually saying, this kind of people cannot come to our congregation, or this kind of people are not truly Christians, or these kind of people are going to go to hell, right? Because of specific, be it like sexual orientation, be about political inclination, even gender sometimes, right? We have some funky things there that when I look back to the teachings and the stories that I hear about Christ in the New Testament, I find a very different Christ than the ones that they speak of, right? I find a Christ of love and acceptance and not one of separation, right? I don't find a Christ who says, I'm not going to hang out with you. I find a Christ that was like hanging out with women of the night, were hanging out with tax collectors, was hanging out with tax collectors were not very well liked, right? At the time, who likes tax collectors anyways, right? Let's be honest. Even to this day, who likes the IRS? Not so much. And who also hang out with people with different ethnicities and different backgrounds, who have tons of stories where he talks to women, for instance, which was a big no-no, right? To talk to unaccompanied women at the time, especially like with women of other ethnicities, like the Samaritan women at Jacob's Well, for instance. He's not supposed to talk to a woman unaccompanied, much less a Samaritan. And he says, no, I'm just going to talk to everybody because I treat everybody the same. And so these are kind of examples that once you start looking at them, you ask yourselves, I don't know if a lot of the message that we're hearing out there that comes from so-called Christians is really about Christ.
Can I say something else here? Then I know as you're talking about this well rounded view of Christ, right? And he exemplified in the culture of the time, going against certain behaviors, accepted behaviors, such as talking to the unaccompanied women, the Samaritan woman. But I think it's important for us to understand, on one hand, he demonstrated a very revolutionary viewpoint of behavior, which is the true behavior that extrapolates any culture, any time, right? It's timeless, it's boundless, it's limitless with what he said. But the other thing is the most revolutionary message that Christ gave to us, indeed, was that to love your enemy, right? And when you love your enemy, up until then, no other religion has ever written down or spoke about that. So I think it's really amazing, because for you to love your enemy, you have to forego of judgment. And if you forego of judgment, then you no longer can cast aside be it individuals from different sexual orientation, political party, as you mentioned, right? Or whatever that may be. So I think that in itself is the most universal message of Jesus Christ, which is the message of love,
So,
unconditionally.
what I'm hearing from the both of you is that Jesus was revolutionary. He was at the forefront of the transformation of our world back then. He was a progressive thinker. But how come so many traditions that follow Christ are the right opposite of that? What was lost halfway through the way?
Great question, Flavio. You're in a questioning mood today. I can tell.
Always.
I think that
I'm
you're
all.
using questions today to deflect speaking. I like that technique too. I like that.
No, I have no problem speaking, as you know for sure by now. But I'm just. It's important to think about one Jesus as we all study the gospel, Jesus' life, right, and so forth. It's one thing to look at Jesus, what he preached when he was amongst us, and see how Jesus is perceived 2,000 years ago, and those two sometimes don't match. What was lost in translation, maybe? I think it's the area that I would love for us to delve into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that he has to go back to that shift and responsibility to us, right? I think that what was lost is that we were unable to keep our eyes on the prize and go back to the origin. And I think that and it's understandable, right? Because as we get together as a group and we start to kind of figure out how we are going to interact with each other, we might make sacrifices. We might have to kind of do different things. And I think it's only normal that we end up losing sight a little bit of the original piece. The question is, can we go back? Can we go back? Because are we putting our own identity of our group above the message, right? Is it more important for me today to feel good about being Christian, or is it more important for me to be Christ-like?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's also a little wrinkle, right? When we talked about early Christian, and you mentioned, I love what you said, right? Who was this figure who preferred or did not bother to speak with the non-accepted? So, from a marginal perspective, right, he really spoke with the outcasts, those individuals that really were outside, in the margins of society. They're not in the mainstream, and he didn't care. But I think it's so important for us to also remember, I don't know, but when we talk about the history of the religion itself, at some point, maybe about 400, 500 years ago, when Rome says, right, Christianity is our official religion, Christianity took on imperial characteristics. And I think it's important for us to remember that it did something amazing, which is the even bigger widespread of the message of the Christ through all the corners of the world, because of course Rome was everywhere. But at the same time, the attributes to Christ became associated a lot with the elite, the emperor, those characteristics that are very much against what Jesus brought, which was that the loving person that loved everybody, regardless of your origin, your gender, your age, etc., etc. So I think it's important for us to understand that in the 2,000 years that are between us and Jesus, there's this seminal event of Christianity becoming a Roman Catholic religion, right?
Yes, I think so. I think you think you know that, and I think you're talking about the Emperor Constantine, right, in
Yeah.
the 4th century, the
Yeah.
Common Era, when we do that. And I think a lot of historians have pointed that part as a shift from the religion of the persecuted
Yeah.
to the religion of the persecutor, right? You become now you're the authority, you are in the majority, and now you have a power to tell people to behave a specific way, and you're corrupted right? You have not learned your lesson from 3 centuries ago when you were beaten down and persecuted, and you know how much it hurt. And then once you climb into power, you go back and you do exactly what was done to you to other people, right? Not in
So
a good way.
if we shift that conversation, if I may, if this just came to my mind, if we shift the conversation, because at some point you asked, Dan, is it about our ego? So if we put that shift from being humble and, with the humble beginnings into now you are the all-powerful religion in this case, how does it also work with us in the, if we think about our ego, right, and how we behave as Christians, following Christ or following whatever else? Do we prefer from our material self, if our need to be respected, to be, all powerful, or are we going to our inner self, our spiritual truth, which is that of a Christ-like?
Marcia, I think it's good that you're touching on all these things, because history really serves us. So I love a quote that goes somewhere along the lines: history is not a good prediction of what's going to happen in the future, but it's a good way for us to understand what happened in the past. I think that the challenge that we should all think about is, how do we not fall under the same traps as what happened in the past, and look into the future, and what can Spiritism do to help us see the Christ, very much so as he came here to show his life. I think it would be impossible to do that if you don't look into, for example, the Sermon of the Mount, where, I mean, a lot of what his teachings were based in the Sermon of the Mount. Even so that Gandhi once said that if all the religious books got lost and we only had the Sermon of the Mount, humanity was safe, because we could trace back from the Sermon of the Mount. And I think a lot of folks, they focus their interpretation on Christ based on their needs, based on their group settings and whatnot. But if you look back, what was his message like? Loving one another, caring for one another, looking at everybody the same. Not just my neighbor, not just those that look like me, not just those that speak like I do, and so forth, but all of us the same, right? Not separating anybody. Everybody's welcome from all walks of life, right? Let's call it this way. I think if you look at this, it gives us a perspective through the Sermon of the Mount, what you do in the future to connect back with the original Christ. That'll be my suggestion.
I love
No,
that,
I love
Flavio.
it.
And I think that it has to do with helping others too. I'm going to add two items to that list, right? Not only accepting, but actually actively lending a hand to other people as well, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think I would add one more. I think that's where our perspective, I think that's the core of it, but I would add one more layer that I think Spiritism brings to us, which is immortality of the soul, right?
Thank you.
I think
Thank
that
you. Yeah.
before Christ, we can argue that all these things, right? Like the love one another, they're all important and they've always been there. But I think what's fundamentally important too is, with Christ, we have the resurrection, right? Quote, quote, resurrection, where he actually comes back to tell us that there is no death, right? That the spirit survives. And I think that is super important, because that spiritual perspective helps us understand everything else that Flavio was talking about. When we understand reincarnation, of course, we cannot be discriminating of other people, because today I might be a man, tomorrow I might be a woman. Today I might be Latin, tomorrow I might be European, and the day after Asian, right? So the dressing does not matter as much as the essence. So I love that we are able to recenter there.
So good thing that you mentioned this, Dan, because if it was not for that Sunday that Jesus came back to show himself, or to prove to those non-believers the life went on. Imagine if I were to tell you, oh, you do all these things, and your end's going to suffer like crazy. We're going to beat you. We're going to crucify you. Would you follow such thing? Probably not.
It doesn't make tons of sense, right?
It makes zero sense.
Yeah. It's like, believe me, like, you got to be good, because just believe me on that one, right? Just believe me on that one. Just because I said, right? I think that the Christ piece shifts that and say, don't just do stuff because I told you, let me show you, right? And he's about showing all the time. So he even shows us that death is not the end of us, because he does the resurrection piece, right? Big
Mm-hmm.
deal. But he also tells us that everything that he has done, we too can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a major connection point, an inflection point that is hard for us sometimes to kind of internalize, because he seems so elevated, so apart from who we are, that we think that he is in a special category, like he was always that way, right? And
Yeah.
of course, he is in a special category. Make no mistake about that, right? But it says that we can get to that point eventually. It's going to take a very long time, but we
And I
can
think that's,
make that effort.
sorry to interrupt. And this is to me the most amazing message. I talked about that one of loving, right? Loving your enemy, but also the fact that we're not perfect, right? None of us, but
Speak for
we're
yourself,
able.
Marcia.
But
Clearly, she did not get the memo then. Clearly, she did not get her memo. Invitation memo.
but we're able to get to that point one time, and that goes again, of course, with the message of the immortality of our souls. So I think this is, it's just such a sense of comfort that me, when I look at myself and I look at all the things that I'm not good yet, that I resent on myself, it's okay. Let's be loving of the enemy, including the enemy inside of me, right?
So,
Because the message is of love. Go ahead.
yeah, what strikes me from your comment, Marcia, is we're not perfect. None of us are, as you alluded to. Even though I may not believe everything, I'm just kidding. We're not perfect. But even those that are transmitting Christ's message are not perfect either. Those
Correct.
that are at religious, standings, and sometimes when we talk about Jesus and the gospel, none of us, right? None of us are perfect.
Great
But
point.
when we look at that, it's really important to differentiate Christ's message with Joe Blow's message, with Maria's soul message, because that's not the
Yeah.
same message. That's
Yeah.
Flavio's interpretation of the message. That's Marcia's interpretation of the message, right? That's the so and so's interpretation of the message. When you look at that, it helps us to see things in a much broader perspective. At least for me, it does. I'm not sure for you guys, but it
Yeah.
helps us to see things in a much broader perspective.
I love
Yeah.
that, Flavio. I think you're driving home a good point, right? We have to
Hmm.
separate the messenger and the
From the
message,
Yes.
message.
right?
Yeah.
Because the message is what matters, but sometimes we lose track because we're just seeing the messenger, right? So while there may be congregations or denominations out there, which you could argue are perhaps not exactly following the exact footsteps of Christ, right? It doesn't it doesn't help the message, but that's not the message, right?
Hmm.
So that's the exception. We got to go back to the message, and I think that's the really hard question that maybe we want to helicopter into this Christmas is, are we going back to the message? Are we spending time to go back? Actually, the question, maybe the sub question, is how do you know of the Christ? How does your knowledge of what the Christ is or has done comes to you? Does it come through somebody else? Did you read it
Hmm.
for yourself? Have you had time to think about it, or are you just accepting that from somebody else? I think that might be more of a central question for us
Yeah.
to reflect during this Christmas period.
I think it's threefold, right? Like as we learn at school, right? We
Hmm.
learn in our family settings, and you learn from our churches, from our traditions, from our congregations, right? Those are the three places that we learn, about Christ. Some more than the others, right? But that's pretty much how we learn from it. And then if the message that we know was given to us based on somebody else's interpretation of the crisis message, right? It's what is it, the elephant game, when the elephants, I mean the little ant, right, it ends up becoming a big elephant. So the message gets misrepresented throughout the years and throughout history and context
Hmm.
and cultures.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think the question is, how do we keep the message fresh?
I'm going to go back to my point before. I think it is through the Sermon of the Mount. it is still there. I mean, knowing what Jesus, and for those who are following us, the Sermon on the Mount is found in Matthew chapter 5 all the way up to chapter 7, where Jesus really, I mean, you may have seen, right, the Sermon on the Mount, some bits and pieces of that, the Beatitudes that Jesus shared with us, the our Holy Father, right, the prayer. I mean, there's a lot of things that are there that we know bits and pieces, but if really, I think to me, that's the foundation or the platform for Christ's teachings, as Emmanuel says.
Yeah, and I think that there's tons of unpacking that we could do there, right, about the Sermon on the Mount in general. I think there's beautiful messages there, and I think you might recall the poetic nature of it too. Blessed are those, right? So there's a really beautiful poetic piece that touches us. But I want to say that the most beautiful Sermon on the Mount is his entire passage with us, is his existence, right?
Yes.
Because he's the
for sure.
interpretation of all that. So I want to make that connection too, because we were talking about here earlier about all the history, and I think you brought in a good point, Flavio, about the future. Is all right. So how does that change us? Like, what does that change how we do and behave? Because ultimately, that's what matters, right? What is it that we're doing if we want to bear that name of Christian, right? Which I think is something that Luke came up with after the fact. How do we honor that? So to be a Christian may not be to be part of a denomination and act like the group of people that you know on your church. Although that's really great to be in community. Make no mistake, right? We're not calling denominations or church a bad thing. Quite the opposite. I think it's a great thing. But I'm saying, like, we have the responsibility to think bigger and ask, am I following Christ or am I following a group of people first? Like, what's more important? And I think that's a difficult question of our times, because there's a lot of power and beauty in being part of a community, but that might not make sense if that community is not exactly doing what you think is most important.
Yeah, and I think, Danny, if I start unpacking, because this is such a great message for us to think about, how do I honor the name of that I give myself, that I am Christian? How can I be Christ-like? And there's so many different aspects of how to do that. And one of them, I love it, Flavio, is to study Christ, study his life, his teachings. But most importantly is to, this is my thought process here, is to be forgiving of yourself, right? To be brave enough to undergo that amazing journey, which is that self-discovery and inner transformation, to look at the new man and leave the old man behind, because we can become Christ-like even if you're not today or even yesterday or 30 incarnations ago, but the possibility of becoming Christ-like is the light that shines bright and pure.
I think the question, right? Or more, more and more Christ-like as we go. More and more Christ-like as we go through this, right? As we go through our lives. I believe the $64,000 question here is, if Christ was here right now, what would he do in my shoes, walking in my shoes? I think if we ask that question at all times, we try to really benchmark our behaviors and hopefully getting closer and closer to what that Christ-like behavior we expect ourselves to be one day. I think having that mindset, or that the journey or the light at the end of the tunnel that we want to position ourselves at, and building the milestones to get there, I think that's the recipe, folks. At least for me, right? My mind works in a Cartesian logical ways, right? If I can't throw a lot of things ahead of me, I have to have a path to get there. Otherwise, I get lost, right?
No, I love that. And I think that part of it is also about thinking what our understand, because at the center of that lens is what you understand the Christ to be.
Correct.
Right? So that how you're going to behave in many different ways is going to depend on how you understand the Christ to be. So I love that Flavio brought that up, because I think it's time for us to ask ourselves, what is it the Christ that we understand? Like, what is it to be like Christ? And then how do I act like it? So I think there's a twofold like plan of action, right? First, let me make sure that I check my assumptions and I know what I'm really focused on. And then how do I put that into practice? And I think that the most fundamental lesson that I take away from the Christ, if I were to simplify his message, which is hard, right? But I think Marcia has already done it. It's love, right? But if I were to add the layer that I'm missing the most in my life, or I feel like historically we have missed the most, is that spiritual component that he had always thought when he was here on earth about spirituality in general. He was always thinking about the immortal spirit. He was always speaking to the immortal spirit. So he was not just worried about your decision here and now. Yes, that too. But he was worried about teaching us that we go beyond the physical. And so I wonder if I bring that frame into my own life when I make my decisions. Am I just thinking about how do I make my physical life more comfortable? Or do I have the foresight that he had to say and understand that we are going to live more than once? Right? Because, I mean, he's got those parts and those prophecies and those kind of things when he says at the end, right, for a little bit, I'm with you, and then for a little bit, I will not be with you. Right? So clearly, he's thinking about the future, right? He's saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm with you now. Then you're going to feel like I'm not with you, but then I will come back, right? And I would argue that that's how we feel. I think he's always been with us. The question is whether we feel he's there or not, and whether we feel like we need to have him in the physical sense to be with him. But his teachings and his message have always been with us, right? And so I think it's a great way that you framed that for us, Flavio. Like, what is it that we believe in, and how do we put it into practice?
I remember many, many years ago when I was teaching youth kids, or teenagers, I should say, and we were talking about how do we get closer and closer to God. I mean, to Jesus' behaviors, right? And one of the very smarty pants student of ours back then said, well, maybe we could be more this and follow God and this. And so what I'm going to do is, my plan is every week I'm going to work on something. So maybe first week I'm going to work on patience. Second week I'm going to work on knowledge. And he laid out, he planned his plan. Every single week he was going to work on something to be better at that something. And I found very ingenious, because you can't work on everything all the time, but there are some things you can focus on. So if there are some cues that maybe I need to forgive more, or maybe I need to be more patient, right? Maybe I need to spread more kindness. Maybe I need to have, practice more charity, right? Or whatever it is that we feel we lack, let's put a plan in place with our own lives and build momentum to address those. And I mean, that, teenager 20-something years ago taught me a very valuable lesson, because I still hold it truth to my days.
I'd love to say something. I'd love to say something. Yeah.
Was this guy called Benjamin? Because
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Because
no, we're not talking about the 13 virtues. Yeah, no. I'm not that old. I'm not that old. Come on, I'm not that old.
But Ben Franklin did exactly
that. Yeah, the 13 virtues, yeah.
Right? For anyone who has not read about it, it's ingenious, because it's self-prescripted. He did not say, I will work on those 13. There are how many? 52 weeks in a year, right? So he divided 4 times, and he would do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and
repeat them.
Yeah. But what was so interesting is when asked, so are you good, Ben? In his deathbed, and he says, no, but a much better person because of it. I did not master any of those 13 qualities that he was trying to achieve. And I think this is it. It's very simple. How can we look at ourselves and choose? I don't know. For me today, maybe to I don't know. Let's say I will be more disciplined, or I may be more caring, more generous, whatever that may be. And let's look into my own way to see my own measurement, right? It's calibrated against my own life, my own self-reflection, and we can be such better people and follow those those beatitudes or the teachings that Christ left with us.
Yeah. And I love that because I think that more important, well, it's not as, maybe what I'm trying to say is maybe it's not as important how you do it, but
Uh-huh.
that you do it, right?
Correct.
Whatever
Thanks.
plan that you do, maybe Benjamin Franklin's 13 virtues are for you. Maybe they're not. Doesn't matter. But whatever it is, like we've got to find a way of working on things that we think are important to us.
Speaking of being important, I think you mentioned something that we're going to do today as we have this new tradition for our conversations. And I think it's about time so we can really shift our gears a little bit towards that then. What do you say?
Ah, sounds good. Sounds good. We've done this before, but maybe it's rapid fire round where we get to ask really rapid fire questions of you, and get to learn more about you guys. Are you guys ready?
So
Go for it.
before we get there, I want to comment on Dan's graphic designs, amazing hashtag not so amazing skills that he put something called rapid fire something on the screen that looked very cheesy, but we are going to do some rapid fire Q&As, I guess. Look at this.
There you go.
Oh,
There we go. All
Jesus.
right. So this is the moment where we take a break, right, from our long discussions and go a little bit shorter. So rapid fire. So what Christmas tradition do you enjoy the most? Flavio.
Setting up the Christmas tree with the kids. It's amazing. I did that with my parents growing up. I think it still is it's a great tradition. It's a great time to spend with family and put the Christmas tree, the lights, and the whole shebang, right, of things. I love it.
How about you, Marcia?
For me, and I'm the dinosaur in the room, I believe. I love writing Christmas cards.
Speaking of which, I got a Christmas card today, Marcia. Thank you.
That is so
I can
awesome.
vouch for that. Yes, that's true. She still writes Christmas cards.
And
Marcia and Randy, yeah. Thank you for that.
thank you. And for me, it's where you pour all your love in the act of, and it may not be the most eloquent or the most beautiful, but that time that you set every year to think of the person and wish well, to me, it's absolutely my favorite time.
I love that.
What about you, Dan? What's your tradition?
I love the Christmas tree too, Flavio. But since you said that, I think I'm going to go ahead and shift it to listening to Christmas music everywhere.
Really? That's so
Yeah,
cheesy.
I know it's very cheesy,
Oh my
but I do
God.
like cheese. And I think it's nice because it kind of gets me in the mood, right? And just kind of thinking about this. But and I also think that doing that in a little bit of a cold weather piece is nice, right? Just I think it kind of draws you into reflection. So, all right. So since we are talking about Christmas trees, what's special about your Christmas tree, Flavio?
Nothing really special. It's a regular Christmas tree with a bunch of lights and a bunch of decorations.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing really special about the tree. I think what's special is getting the tree set up. It's the process, the journey, not so much the destination. To be honest, even though if my wife is listening to this, I'm sorry, honey. I'm nothing against the tree. It's still a very beautiful tree, very colorful. Lights are blinking. I love it. But it's the whole time we spend together. It's building with the kiddos. It's hey, what about this? What about that? Getting the letters, climb up. I think the whole the journey to get the final product done.
Yeah.
I think that's what matters. And by the way, that's the same with happiness, right? I mean, happiness is not a destination; it's a journey.
Yeah, and shout out to Flavio's wife, who, by the way, is named Flavia. They are very original over there in that family, Flavio and Flavia. But the thing about Flavia that's absolutely amazing, she is a master of arts and crafts. So I
Awesome.
imagine that Flavio's, Christmas tree must be like a beautiful Christmas tree if it was done by Flavia.
You are 100% correct. It was done mostly by her. I'm only the one putting things from her commands. You're spot on, then.
And Marcia, how about you? Any fun details about your Christmas tree?
Well, then what I've done in the past, oh, I don't know, since the kids are grown, so the past decade or so, I've asked that they themselves make a Christmas decoration for me, and seeing slowly being built this beauty. There's no nothing. There's no limit to size or material or anything, but it's just those ornaments that go into a tree are very, very special to me.
I
Wow.
love that. And I have something similar, and that's my favorite part too. I'm going to marry what Flavio and Marcia said. So, what we have in our family is a tradition of getting Christmas ornaments throughout the year for whatever it is that we've done together, right? And so, if we travel somewhere, we get an ornament from the place that we travel to. And our process of putting the tree together is bringing all these ornaments from these past years and putting them one at a
Memories.
time and remembering where we were together. And it's just such a lovely moment for us. So I'm 100% on board with Flavio's comment about the process, right? Just spending the time in making those memories. So in many different ways, our Christmas tree is a memory tree, right?
Love
For
it.
all those
Love
wonderful
it.
moments. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Ready for some true and false questions? We'll do two of them.
Sure.
Okay. The tradition here, true or false, the tradition of leaving Santa a little snack to help him in his journey started in the US. True or false?
I
I
don't
like
know.
milk and cookies,
Yeah.
right? It started in the U.S. I would say, I don't know.
I'd say it's false.
I think it's true.
Ah, look at him hedging your
I,
bets there.
I think it's true because I don't know if other countries have the same custom or habit of eating cookies with milk.
Hmm.
So I'm just tying the cookies and milk with the U.S. So that's
All your
my bad.
anthropological and sociological training kicking in there, Flavio. I can see it. Actually, it is false. The tradition started in it's a Dutch tradition. It was
Dutch? Oh my
yes, it's
God.
Dutch. It started with on Saint Nicholas Day on December 6th, where Dutch children would leave him food and drinks to be exchanged for gifts overnight. Right.
Mhm.
So look at that. So our milk and cookies. I thought it was a very American tradition. The first, not so American like that.
Bah. I
Yeah.
got I got the sound.
And so, since we're talking about traditions, let's do another one as well. Um,
Okay.
so, the tradition. This is a statement. You're going to tell me whether it's true or false. Are you ready? Okay.
Let's
The
go.
tradition of hanging Christmas stockings started by accident.
Christmas
Ah,
stockings started by accident. I'm gonna go my interpol sociological mindset. Probably yes, because women were putting their stockings to dry in front of the fireplace, and then they just left there, and then eventually Santa just left some gifts inside of them. Maybe I would say yes. It was by
And
accident.
you nailed it. You nailed it, Flavio, because according to legend, right, it was a man who didn't have a dowry for his daughters, and so they washed their socks and hung by the fireplace to dry. And then generous old son Nick dropped by and left a little bit of gold in each of their socks, so they could use it as dowry for their weddings, right? So yes, I think that the stockings piece is also something nice and new
Really
that we have.
interesting. Very interesting.
my apologies. We just had a slight power outage. My apologies.
No worries, no worries. All
So is
right.
it true
So
or false? I'm excited to hear.
it was true. It was true.
So tell me, can you repeat that? I'm really interested to know where did it begin?
No, too late. You dropped
Oh,
out. We don't get to repeat it. All
oh,
right.
Oh, I think no, she's not. She hasn't dropped again. No, she's back.
No, it was true. It
oh.
was true, Marcia. It was according to legend, it was a man had some daughters and he was not doing financially well,
Oh.
and he didn't have enough money for their dowries, right? To pay for their weddings and so forth. And then so they washed their socks and hung them to dry in the fireplace overnight, which is the logical place for you to do that, right? Back in the
Exactly.
day.
So,
And apparently old Saint Nick dropped by and left a little bit of gold in there.
Oh,
So
I love it. I love it.
so coincidentally, I was talking to a coworker today about Christmas traditions,
Yes.
and I have one. I mean, very, very, right off the oven here for you guys.
Go ahead.
There is a unique Christmas tradition that on Christmas Eve, all broomsticks are hidden out of sights, and that actually started in Norway. Is that true or false?
hiding the broomstick.
Hiding broomsticks.
And started in Norway. So there are two components of there.
Yeah. So why? I mean, it's the thinking here is that the night before Christmas, bad witches and spirits will come out, and if their broomsticks are to be found, they'll take them and fly them away into the skies.
Wow,
That's the reason for that.
That is very interesting. I'm going to go for a truth.
Yeah, it's got to be true, right? So,
It is so
we're mixing
outlandish.
all kinds of traditions in Christmas. Which
So here's what I told my friend, because he's Norwegian, right? So I was like, I heard this in Salem, Massachusetts. This is the town of the witches. He goes, no. So the answer is true. In Norway, there's this tradition that in Christmas Eve, everybody hides their broomsticks because it was believed that the witches will take them and fly them away with evil spirits and whatnot. But this again, we talked about that on our Halloween, right? If you haven't not listened to our Halloween podcast, our Halloween episode of Conversations, there goes our spoiler alert for you to listen to our Conversations.
And that also means for Harry Potter fans out there, there's no Quidditch playing during Christmas apparently in Norway because you can't hop in your broom and fly away. But we're reaching that point where we're beginning to wrap up, and I love that we've done a little bit of Christmas here because Christmas really is a mash-up of traditions, right? Historians have told us that it's very unlikely that Christ was actually born in December. That in fact,
very unlikely.
That date was just co-opted from more of a Roman Saturnalia tradition of like giving gifts and putting evergreens together. That's very okay for the reasons that we talked about here. It's about the symbolism, right? It's about what we do with it. So maybe a good way of wrapping up here is asking yourself, so what do you take away for this Christmas? What is the message or the things that you want to do this Christmas?
I think we should do ladies first.
Ladies first? All right.
Because, especially the lady who's wearing this beautiful Christmas hat. Why not?
The takeaway for me is to really, as beautiful as I like the lights and the decorations and the Christmas trees and the Christmas ornaments, is really to look at ourselves and see and ignite the light that is within ourselves and shine that light to ourselves, to our family members, to everyone out there, because this is a very special time of the year where we become closer. We get so busy with life. So take this time to think, to shed the most positive thoughts and warmth and love to everyone.
Wonderful. Flavio, is that you or I next?
I think we should do age before beauty, my friend. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I like the little switcheroo there, the plot twist. I think that my biggest takeaway from today and for Christmas in general is to going back to the idea of Christ. And I know that we hear a lot of like, put Christ back in Christmas, which I think is a little bit too edgy for me, because I think Christ will be very okay with saying happy holidays to people, right? He wouldn't be into himself. So when I say put Christ back in Christmas, I'm saying going back to the idea of how do I know of the Christ? And what is it that I have learned about his passage here with us that I can apply to my life? What does it mean to be more Christmas-like or Christ-like, right? And how do I put that into play? So I think that's the message that I take away. And I want to be on brand here by following our topic, right? Like follow Christ, not Christians. I think the idea is to go back to the origin. It's very okay to call yourself Christian, very okay to be part of a church or denomination, but let's also go back to the original message and check on understanding, or what is it we think that is.
Love it. Because I think it also, it resonates with what I was thinking to say as well, which is to bring ourselves closer and closer to Christ, to be more Christ-like, to always ask the question, what would Christ do if he were in my shoes right now? And this time of the year, especially coming, out of the pandemic, still in the pandemic, spending time with friends, spending time with family, right? I think this to me is the best present that we can all, ask for. And if we are to give presents, let's give presents, but let's not forget to be present to people's lives. I think that to me is the two big messages that I look forward to, doing and really practicing more through the Christmas season.
Great. Thank you, Flavio. That is absolutely great.
Hey, Dan, before we wrap, I do have a question for you, if I may.
What do you
I heard over the grapevine that your book is now available in a different format. Can you talk to us about that?
Thank you for asking that, kind sir. I am very happy to share that a little bit earlier, a couple of weeks ago, we have released the audiobook version of Our Road to Damascus, which is available in all major platforms.
Congratulations.
And if you're looking for a stocking stuffer, you can download it today. You can do it in audio, digital, or buy a paper copy. Although I'm sure the paper copy is not going to reach you. But it's really a different take on the personal transformation of Paul of Tarsus, right? Of St. Paul, so to speak, and do it in a way that is not as religion-y. It's more about the person. So thank you for bringing that up. And I hope that you guys enjoy, and you can shamelessly check it out at danassisi.com.
Oh, that's awesome. And for those of you who have not read the book, it's an amazing book that talks about, Paul's journey and how we can really mirror his journey to our own selves. Again, congrats, Dan, on the great work there. I haven't really heard the audiobook yet, but whose voice is in there, Dan?
Oh, yes. It is narrated by the author. So you get to take me on your commute if you want to.
Oh,
it's like
my
having me
God.
in your living room, which might not be a good thing. But anyway, go for
it. Congratulations, Dan. And thank you, Flavio, for reminding us of this amazing new milestones for the book.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, friend. And, with that in mind, Marcia, we are so excited to have you here. Tell us a little bit about, where can folks connect with you if they want to get to know more about you and anything else that you have in the works for us?
Very good. Thank you. Currently, I have moved recently to Nashville, so I am reaching for opportunities, but I have been working with the psychological series of Joanna DeAngelis. So we discuss that on a weekly basis on Saturdays, and another group on Sundays. We're doing a beautiful, beautiful work. You can reach me at Marcia@Trajano.me. So it's my personal domain. Very easy to reach me. I would love to hear from you and connect with you. And if you're trying to hear more about the amazing Jungian perspective of Spiritism and the teachings of our journey, let us know. We're there to talk about it.
So, Marcia, one more question, if I may. If somebody that's listening to us happens to live in the vicinity of Nashville and perhaps wanted to maybe study more, Kardec's works, can that individual reach out to you as well?
Absolutely. That would be a great honor and pleasure to talk about how we can do this here in the city. Absolutely.
Awesome. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
All right.
Dan, is that a wrap?
That's a wrap, my friends. We just want to remind all our friends out there that we really appreciate you, and we hope that you have a wonderful Christmas and holidays in general. We want to say thank you for watching or listening to Spiritist Conversations, which is a production of the Spiritist Institute. And if you enjoy today's conversations, please share it with a friend and like us on social media too. It helps get the word out. And to revisit past episodes, head on over to YouTube for video or your favorite podcast platform for audio. We do both. And of course, you can also find us at our website, spiritistconversations.org. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being with us, Marcia.
Thank
It's
you.
great to have you. And Flavio, always great to see you, my friend.
Likewise, folks. Thank you so much.
Have a great one.
Have a great one.